So if we talk about discrimination, then in the Central European region, Hungary and Poland are the two countries which particularly experience this discrimination from the leaders of the European Union. So it's the Article 7 procedures, exclusion from the European Union is used as the sword of Damocles above us, just because we are not willing to accept the migrant-friendly policies that the European Union leaders, Brusselites, want us to adopt. So our last presenter today is Mr. Imre Palkovics, who is the president of the Hungarian Alliance of Workers' Councils. Let me just quote Gábor Bethlen, who was a governor of Transylvania in the Middle Ages, and we have to remember his words. It is not always possible to do what we have to, but we always must do whatever is possible. So, Mr. Imre Palkovics, the floor is yours. So let me warmly welcome all the participants. As the president of the National Association or National Federation of Workers' Councils at this very important European Civil Movement Conference, the conference which is trying to describe a European future and starting from the present to make recommendations, observations, which also have a very important interest for the employees. So it's a social dimension of the European Union which affects the workers the most. So one of the basic starting points of the European Union was economic cooperation. And the success of this economic cooperation brought with itself the historic endeavors, achievements, which were seen in the European society. So it's not only the advantages, especially for the investors, but also to bring rules for employees which can ensure the livelihood, the decent work, and the future for people who, which the employees feel that it's worth making sacrifices and it was worth waiting for the years when during communist times we were just looking with interest at the European cultural and living standard differences. And unfortunately, in this integration endeavors, the workers had to be disappointed. The first disappointment was experienced at the time of accession, when we found out that the basic values and all the advantages were only made available after 7 years of waiting. So the free access or lack of free access meant that we had a second-class citizenship state. And it was actually requested by the Western trade unions not to allow the newly joined countries' workers to the labor market. So much about the international labor movement solidarity. But at the same time, the enticing of highly qualified professionals has been going on and is still going on unrelentlessly. So there was not a lot of positive to be said about the mobility or the even after the restrictions were lifted. There was a very serious extraction of qualified workers, which caused labor shortages. Of course, this is a more complicated issue because the very low Eastern European wages also had a significant effect. So there was an ambivalent situation created for the Eastern European workers in relation to the social policy of the EU as well. So as we know, the primary aim in creating the EU was economic cooperation, but during the extension, the citizens of the different member countries paid more attention to the social dimension as well. So in 2017, the white paper on the social issues, the social dimensions, was published. And I have to say that these measures and these aims just seems like measures on the level of appearance. Now, I would list here the situation of employees which are delegated or posted abroad. But you had to be really blind that the real aim was to push out the companies in the Eastern European region from the central countries by making the accepting countries pay only minimum wages. So it was actually aimed at just protecting their own workers. So we have to increase the salaries and wages of these. So it's another trap, the social pillar, which was recently adopted. Now, the story about this is that there should be no difference between the social security, social safety of European citizens. And I think the majority would agree with this initiative. But if we get involved in the issue, and if we just look at the strengthening of the Eastern European economies, and that the governments have to do this instead of strengthening their own economies, then again, the intention is very nice on the surface, but in actual fact, it's the competitiveness of these countries to be constrained, and the social responsibility that the member countries, which were formerly socialist and now under market economy conditions, they will not be able to do that if the social levels are determined according to central quotas instead of the local economic agreements and adjusted to their local possibilities. So the social pillar is ambivalent from the point of view of having important goals, but there is no mandatory provision or legislation. So they often say that there is always a legislative procedure which is launched by the European Union, but the European minimum wages is another issue like this. In relation to this, there is a big dilemma whether we should support this or not, or is this another trap? Is it just simply a union level fooling of the people? Because it's a very noble aim that 10 out of 100 are poor people who are working, And a European minimum wages would be an important tool or an asset. We are not talking about a central model for the establishment of minimum wages in the member countries. Now, in order to have a social acceptance and social support, if we really look deep into this issue, even if it's introduced, then there will not be a higher minimum wage as a result. In Hungary, there have been significant increases of the minimum wages, and the Hungarian government made an agreement in 2016 about a long-term 6-year program, and there was the first stage of 2 years in 2019 and 2020. And based on compromises, there are agreements which take into consideration the burden-bearing capacity of the countries, bringing them into a better position. So I believe that European legislation should include or should be based on labor and other agreements. So the regulation of daily life should be kept at the member country level. Otherwise, they will not be able to meet the expectations that the Western European countries are trying to set. So we have some suspicion that it will stop the dynamic development of the different member countries if it's not the citizens or the stakeholders of the different countries. So these are the dilemmas that we often face in respect of the European Union.